All right, so I wanted to do a couple of videos about my experience with a laparotomy that I just had about a month ago, and to talk about how I ended up with it and what my recovery has been like. When I found out that I was going to have it, I went to YouTube to look for videos for people's shared experiences, and of course there were none. And then as I called my friends, they had similar experiences, but they were still different. So I want to talk about mine. I first want to give you the backstory. So in 2014, I had my daughter Tiana, and in 2015, February of 2015, I had an IUD, the Mirena, inserted as a form of birth control. And so those last 5 years, and then after 5 years, you have it taken out and you have a new one put in. So that's what I did in February of 2020. Now, to go back, after I had the 2015 Mirena inserted, they cut the strings, and every time I would go back for my doctor's appointment, the doctor would not be able to find the strings. So they'd have to push on my stomach and then like go fishing for it in my girly parts, and they would eventually find the string with all of the pushing and the searching. So that was never an issue. Never thought anything about it other than the fact that the strings were cut short. 2020, February 2020, I have the new one put in, and in March, I go back to have it checked because you go in for a 1 month appointment. And so I go in, and the doctor's looking for the string, and I specifically told her when she inserted it to make sure that the strings were cut longer so that we wouldn't have this issue of having to search for it every single time that I came back to the doctor. So she does that, and then in March, when she goes to look for it, she can't find it. All right, so no big deal. You know, we'll just go look for it with a vaginal ultrasound. So that's what she orders, and I go to the tech, and I'm laying on the little medical bed, and the tech's in there, and she's like, "Hey, are you in any pain?" Nope. Should I be in any pain? She says, "Well, I don't know." And she keeps looking, and she's like, "Well, do you see this here?" No. Like, because, you know, it's hard. If you've ever seen like an ultrasound, it's just about impossible to look at that screen and see anything unless you're trained to. But she points to this mass on the camera, and she says, "Well, this is a cyst, and it's fairly large, so I'm going to have to send you back to the doctor." So I go back to the doctor, and the doctor pulls out these photos, and she's like, "You should be in pain. Are you not in any pain?" "No, I am not." She says, "Well, you have a 11 or 12 centimeter ovarian cyst on your right ovary, and it's very large." Okay, so I'm still not thinking anything about it. So she says that it has to be removed. I said, "Okay, that's fine. Does it just come out laparoscopically? Do you just go in with the little lasers?" And she said, "Oh, no. This is so large, we have to take it out through a laparotomy, which means a cesarean style cut, bikini cut." And I don't think it still registered to me like what that actually meant. But I said, "Okay, well, you know, I'm a teacher. I'll just have it done in the summertime." She says, "Oh, no, honey, this has to come out soon." And this is, of course, all before COVID-19. And so she said, "You know, we're looking at April." So I'm all upset because I'm going to have to miss the last 6 weeks of school because she, of course, tells me it's going to be a 6-week recovery because it's major surgery. And I'm upset because, you know, I don't want to miss the last 6 weeks of school. Like, it's important that teachers see their kids off to the next school year. But, of course, I go to work, a hot mess of a person. And I talk to my supervisor. I tell him what's happening, and he makes the joke. He says, "Well, maybe, you know, you'll only miss 3 weeks of school because if this COVID thing turns out to be anything, you just might miss 3 weeks instead of 6 weeks." Ha, ha, ha. Right? So fast forward, I end up, long story short, I end up going with another doctor that was recommended to me by a friend at work. And I go into that doctor's office, and she sees the 11 centimeter cyst and, of course, confirms that I have to have a laparotomy. And she's like, "Well, there's something else over here on your left ovary as well." "What do you mean?" So then we start this conversation of, well, the one on your right ovary, and I drew a picture, hold on. So this is my picture. This is my uterus. That's my right ovary, and the cyst, that one's fine. It had a little something on it. But this is what it looked like right? And she's like, well, this cyst is so large that you're going to have to lose the ovary with it. It's going to be very difficult to hold on to this ovary. So it's going to be I can't say it properly, oophorectomy. Anyway, where they take out the cyst and they take out the ovary. Okay, that sounds fair. Like, I can respect that. And then she says, well, this one over here, I don't know if we'll be able to save it. And this one may need to come out too. Okay, so what does that mean? I haven't had sex education in, I don't know, 25 years, right? And so all this stuff I forget. I just know that I have these parts and I know what they're supposed to do. And they've been working perfectly fine up until just this moment. But apparently, your hormones come from the ovaries and not the uterus. The uterus is just a house for a baby. And if you lose both of your ovaries, then you're talking about menopause at 38, which is not a big deal considering that my blood work came back and it's all benign and perfectly fine. All right, so after having that conversation with my doctor, I am now not concerned about the surgery. I'm more concerned about the possibility of going into menopause early. I am already a hot-natured person, and I have watched my mom have the hot flashes, and that's just not something I wanted to deal with. So anyway, I go to the internet and I try looking up all this stuff. I call all of my friends who I know have had these kinds of surgery, and come to find out that the people I know who had hysterectomies, apparently a hysterectomy is when you take out the uterus, but you can be left with your ovaries, right? Like, okay, so in this picture, like, this part can come out, but if you're left with your ovaries, you don't go into menopause. Who knew that? Who knew that? I didn't know that. I did not know that. And so, of course, I talked to my mom. She's like, oh, no, I had a hysterectomy, but I still have my ovaries. Okay. I talked to somebody else, and they still had their ovaries, but they didn't have a uterus. So all these things. And so I'm the only one who's looking at the possibility of having a total hysterectomy, because the doctor says, well, if you take out both of the ovaries and you're done having children, then leaving the uterus really isn't a great idea, because now you're left with still the possibility of having like different cancers, uterine cancers, cervical cancer, et cetera, et cetera. So it would make sense to remove it all, and then you're fine. But so no, I didn't want that. So I had to think about it. I had to pray about it. I knew that I'd have to have the surgery to have the cyst removed, and that is ultimately what happened. But of course, it all turned out slightly different than what I was expecting going into surgery. Now, just to go back a little further, I never had any issues with my lady parts. All right, like I've always had regular cycles and heavy periods, painful, but not in recent years, not with the IUD and not with any of the birth controls or anything that I took. But go back to 2007, I developed what I thought was gas. I thought I ate something that ended up with like the worst case of gas I'd ever had. And I was living with my parents at the time. I was fresh out of grad school. And I tell my folks, and my dad's like, I've got a remedy for you. Okay. So he gets ginger ale, a glass of ginger ale, and a raw egg, and he puts the raw egg in the ginger ale, whips it up with a fork, and makes me drink it. So if you know anything about me, if you've ever heard me talk about raw eggs, you know that I can't stand runny eggs, raw eggs, like I can't do it. But anyway, my daddy made me drink the eggs in the ginger ale. It was frothy, it was gross. And once I gagged it down, he was like, go for a walk. So my mom and I, we go for a walk. And I'm walking on my toes because, of course, I'm in so much pain from what I think is gas. Fast forward to 3 a.m. that night, or that early morning, next morning. And I tell my mom, you know, I wake her up. I say, listen, there's something wrong. We've got to go to the ER. Only time I've ever been to the ER for myself. We hop up, drive down to Crawford Long, go in. And so the doctor, I just started a new job with the state, so I had to make sure I got back to work. So the young doctor walks in. He's like, so what's happening? I said, well, I just have bad gas. I think if you just gave me something for the gas, I'd be okay, because I have to go to my new job in the morning. He says, well, I don't think you have gas. I was like, I'm sure I do, right? Like I have an MD, right? He says, well, let me tell you this. He says, we don't get any people who are brought into the ER because of gas. There's something else happening, right? So they hook me up to a drip, like a morphine drip or something, and all the pain goes away. And he decides to send me in through those scanning machines. I don't know what it's called, but to see what's happening. And they're checking for ectopic pregnancy and what's that thing called? Your appendix, all of that. And come to find out, I had a cyst on my ovary, which I believe now is this cyst that was just removed. So anyway, in 2017, I go into the ER for a cyst on my ovary, which apparently was small enough. And he said, well, most women have cysts on their ovaries and they likely go away with time. Okay. He's like, I'm going to give you this pain medicine. You're going to take the pain medicine. If you have any problems, contact your doctor, et cetera, et cetera. Well, I take the pain medicine. Nothing ever happens after that. Like, I feel perfectly fine until I go look for that darn IUD string and end up with this 11 centimeter grapefruit sized cyst on my ovary, which is removed for me. So, yeah, that leads us up to the 9th of June, which is when I had surgery. And of course, because of COVID, I couldn't have it sooner. And the whole experience of going into surgery during this time is totally different than you normally would have. So I'm going to do another video on that. But I wanted to give you kind of the foundation of what was happening and why I ended up in surgery.